Welcome everyone, this is Jim Tolles. Today we're going to be talking about what is true kindness. And so while everyone's logging on, we're taking a few minutes to get settled. I encourage you to take a few deep breaths and give yourself time to come into this space, to let go of whatever you've been doing, let go of thinking about the future, and just be here. Hi John. As always, it's good if someone can let me know if they can hear me. Just to make sure all the technology is working right. You can just type something quick in the chat pod. Great, thanks for letting me know. Let's take a few deep breaths here. Breathing deep into the chest and the back and shoulders. And slowly breathing out. As many of you know, I do this to help people just tune into themselves. We spend a lot of time stuck in our heads, doing lots of different things. And we can get really ungrounded and unclear. And so just by coming back to the breath, everything just starts working better in the human body. As always, I like to remind you that the clearer you are in yourself, the easier it is to think and to understand and to hear your own intuition. And I'm always guiding you back towards your own inner knowing. You have the same wisdom that I do. Wisdom has not changed in a million years, and it will not change in a million more. It's that beautiful space of isness, and we're all equal in that space. So I don't have anything more to offer you than you already have. I'm just here to help you clear away any debris that stands in the way of you acknowledging your own inner wisdom. For those of you who are new, I usually talk for 25 to 30 minutes, and then I take questions in the remaining half hour or so. You can type in your questions in the right-hand side chat pod. You have to be logged into Google to do so, but it's pretty easy. In general, please keep the questions and comments directed to me and limit any crosstalk talking to each other because I don't want to miss anybody else's comments. And of course, please be respectful towards me and everyone else. Let's take a few more deep breaths, drawing the breath into the belly. Just giving yourself more space to relax even deeper. And after these next couple of breaths, we'll drop into this topic today of what is true kindness. See what we discover together. So for those of you who registered on my blog, which is spiritualawakeningprocess.com, for anyone who may have come across this live feed and doesn't know who I am, my name is Jim Tolles, and I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. And on that blog, I happen to post a Rumi quote. Also, as a quick aside, if anyone feels like supporting me and donating, you can go to that blog, spiritualawakeningprocess.com, and there's a PayPal button on the right-hand side, and every donation counts, and it means a lot to me. That's how I get to do this work full-time, is because all of you. So the Rumi poem, I believe it's like Jesus on the Lean Donkey is what it's called. And it's just a wonderful microcosm of this question of what is true kindness. So if you haven't read the poem, I'll just kind of summarize it. But I'll start by summarizing what the sleeping man sees in this scenario. There's a man who's asleep, and the first thing that he notices in the poem when he wakes up is that he's being beaten by another man. And he has like no idea what is going on. And of course, if any of us woke up to someone beating the crap out of us when we were sleeping, we would immediately assume this is a bad thing and try to get away from this maniac. And that's precisely what this individual does. The person wakes up and this other guy is still beating him and is like chasing him, and then they get to this tree where there's all these rotten apples, and then this other guy starts forcing to eat all these rotten apples, and this keeps going on, and the one man won't leave the man who is sleeping alone. It just keeps going, and the sleeping man is like, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing this to me? Of course. And then eventually, like, he just kind of breaks down exhausted and like barfs up all these rotten apples, but also this poisonous snake. Once he sees that there was this poison inside and that the other man was not trying to hurt him, was trying to help him get rid of this poison that was stuck inside, his perspective on the whole thing changes. Suddenly what looked like something that was mean and abusive has been an opportunity for greater freedom. And so if you go to my blog and you can read through the whole poem, and this is an instance that I believe is just a wise man, I think Rumi is referring to. And the wise man was coming along and then saw this happen, saw this snake, this vile poison. And the poison can be anything. It could be, we could call it self-hatred. We could call it a lack of self-worth. We could call it fear of the unknown. We could call it any fear. So think of the snake as fear, right? And he sees this fear, infusing this person. And he immediately jumps to the rescue, really. He wants to help this person, doesn't want this person to be poisoned from the inside and sickened by this awful pain. And he was using his intuition the entire time, where he wanted to help this person, didn't want to hurt this person. It was always kind of, in the poem, it's described as kind of having this contact with God, wanting to know, please let this be easy for this person that I'm beating like a maniac. And so right there, we kind of have the whole microcosm of the question is, what is true kindness? When does something that may be difficult for one person actually a deeper kindness? And in an interesting way, we can ask ourselves, when is something that is comfortable actually not kindness at all, a kind of meanness in and of itself? Maybe we can point to the way people eat sugar or alcohol or drugs, right? Those things often bring good feelings, bring comfortable feelings and enjoyable experiences. But a lot of that's sickening to the body. A lot of it's not healthy to the body. So that's not kindness at all, is it? It's a kind of meanness. But when we don't understand ourselves, we don't really understand the world around us, we can misunderstand these things. And of course, I feel like picking on sugar today. With that, it's so common in so many things and so socially accepted, like many kinds of interesting poisons that we're putting into ourselves. We don't even think that there could be something wrong. It's go have ice cream. And I'm not saying all sugar all the time is bad or that you shouldn't have ice cream or anything like that. I'm just pointing to something that's very common. And this sort of common poison that we ingest, we get used to it. And we start to know no other way of thinking about it, that it's just there. It's just something I'm going to ingest. It's fine. Everybody else is doing it. We can turn the poison, the snake metaphor into the concept of keeping up with the Joneses, right? This idea of we have to keep up with what other people are doing, have all these things, have certain clothes, look a certain way, have a certain family. Right? And so that causes people to exhaust themselves trying to achieve these different things that they think are going to make them be happy, things that, from what society is telling them, is kindness to themselves, is going to be good for their lives, and then oftentimes it is not. And I'm sure there are examples in your own life, and I encourage you to kind of think of them, where something that seemed difficult or unkind turned out to be a greater kindness. And something that seemed like it would be fun or a good thing in general turned out to not be a good thing at all. Sometimes some of you may have been lucky enough to achieve a sort of dream job, something that was like something you always wanted to do. And then you get there and you realize it is not what you thought it would be. Right? So that's a way that the mind projects out onto situations of what should be kind and what should be mean, or what should be good, what should be bad. And this goes on in a lot of ways because the ego self is always rating things. It's always putting things in kind of the threat, non-threat bucket, which ends up being the good, bad, kind, mean buckets. It's all kind of the same thing to the ego. But as I said, we don't really understand ourselves, why we want what we want. We don't really understand what kindness is. I think this is why I like to use the metaphor of the broken leg. Where like setting a broken bone really, really hurts, but it's an extremely important kind of kindness for somebody to set that bone. But just imagine for a second you don't realize you have a broken bone and you don't understand what the person's doing to you. And that goes back to the Rumi poem that I was talking about earlier. And this happens a lot on the spiritual path. That's why I do a lot of the explaining that I do on the blog, to help people understand that there are going to be certain intensities in your own inner work that are actually for your benefit, for helping you be happier, more whole, and more able to live life and see life clearly. There are many ways that a lot of people live in the kindness of a cage, right? The kindness of a prison, where you're cut off and limited in what you can experience. And if we think we've gotten what we wanted, we believe in that illusion, even though we're cut off from ourselves and from a lot of other things. And if people are too comfortable in that cage, they will not want to leave. That's why it's pretty common for some of the people who really embrace the spiritual path that they feel that they have the least amount to lose. That at this point, it's like, why not? Awakening can be very difficult for somebody who awakens to a life of comfort and luxury and find themselves amidst this tons of misery, that they're not actually happy with all the things that they have in this comfort. But then they want to be, and they want to believe that they are. And that can create additional suffering as somebody fights the truth that they're not happy with what they have, because they don't want to give it up, because they don't want to face other kinds of physical difficulty that there might be. So for somebody, once again, this is the man being beaten and woken up. They don't realize the snake inside. And you really have to come to a certain point in your own inner work where you start to, seriously, we don't necessarily barf out the whole of the snake. We barf out parts of the poison, parts of the issue as we go. As it starts to kind of come out of us as we're healing, as we're doing our energetic barfing, you start to realize, this has been in me the whole time. And this usually drives more of that inner inquiry where like, what was it doing? What was it causing me to do? And the more you barf this up and the more you kind of see the reality of how your life was, you start to say to yourself, oh my goodness, who have I been? What have I done? And this often leads us towards greater inquiry and levels of atonement, levels of forgiveness to ourselves for the things we've done to ourselves and for the things that we've done to others. Right? And that journey of self-inquiry is really how we're going to find out what true kindness is. I would say the quickest answer to this question of what is true kindness, it is that arising of truth in any moment. Whatever the moment is, if there's some level of interaction going on and there's some need to kind of wonder what the kindness of that moment is, you go within. And returning to yourself and turning to your own wisdom inside, you will best know what is the appropriate action in that moment And that really does tend to be the most kind thing. I've not experienced myself or others that when we're really quiet and we're still, that we do anything to perpetuate suffering. We may do things that are difficult for other people to hear, but this is why we go inside, so we can start to understand what this kindness is. If we don't, then it's very easy to get triggered by the external response that we're going to get. I know that many of you enjoy my blog, and I'm really grateful for your support and for your love that you shine on me, but not everybody is. Right? And so that's why we're in my own work. I have to be grounded in this space of my own wisdom, because other people are going to be triggered by the kindness of my own words. And it's not like anybody has to come and read it. But some people do, and it triggers them and they don't like it, right? Because they're not used to kindness. Maybe in some sort of metaphorical way, my blog is like the maniac with a stick hitting somebody in the head, and they're just not ready to admit that there's a problem. And so they say, oh, this is nonsense, or you're stupid, right? And they run off, and my blog's not going to chase them. That tends not to be my way. I tend to let people come to me when they're ready. But that may not always be the case. So the more we drop inwards, the more that quality of kindness really does shift and change. So sometimes we're more active in offering it to others, and sometimes we're more in the receptive mode, and we allow people to come find us for whatever kindness we may be offering to them. A lot of times kindness is going to be exactly what we've been taught to think it is. It's a kind word, a compliment, a little bit of encouragement. But I really, really want you to expand your understanding of kindness beyond that, especially any of you who are going through awakening and are going through some of the difficult things that come up, that is such an amazing level of kindness that is happening inside you. When someone awakens and that energy starts to move all on its own, it is so smart and it's so wise, and it's just taking you towards wholeness. It's taking you out of the pain of the ego self. That is a tremendous amount of kindness, and what you generally find as the difficulty parts are usually all the parts where the ego is still holding on. We often have misunderstood where the pain is. This is why I use river metaphors. Where the river, if it flows freely, it doesn't bother you. And if nothing is flowing, you don't feel bothered by that. But when the river starts to run into dams and to rocks, right, those are your issues. Those are your ways you're holding out. You can have a tremendous amount of pressure on that, and it feels bad. And so the tendency is to blame the river, right? That energy that's now alive within yourself, rather than to blame the block, at least initially, especially when people don't understand what's arising. Some of you have been around me for a while and have done enough inner work to know that, okay, so this is the block inside, but it's still not any more fun. This is where I'm holding on. How do I surrender? And I think that surrender is just such an important aspect of seeing life, so we can see what real kindness is. Many people want to run off and save the world after awakening, or just in general. But if you don't understand what's needed, you can create all sorts of problems for other people because you don't know how to engage with the situation properly. There are all these interesting stories where, like, some humanitarian group would drop like peanut butter or some food on a community that doesn't eat peanut butter. You can just research the web and you can find some of these really funny stories. And what's happening there is there's a level of ignorance about the situation. So true kindness really draws us towards a level of clarity, of understanding. It's a very intelligent place to really understand a situation before dropping peanut butter on people who are not going to eat it. So in stepping back and being able to evaluate a situation, it also allows us to engage with it. And while there are many instances like the sleeping man with a snake in his belly, where people don't know the issue that needs to be addressed and aren't ready to hear about it, there are plenty more other issues where people are. And this really comes to mind, a lot of efforts that may go on in Africa and other places where people don't really engage with the people they're trying to help. They just start throwing things at them. Right? So that's a way that ignorance plays into it and can cause additional problems to local economies, and doesn't actually help people get back on their feet, and can foster systems that dependency is being created rather than the independence for the people to get through a disaster, whether it's a famine, disease, water shortage, or something else. So doing your own inner work clears away a lot of your judgments, a lot of your own issues, so you can see things clearly. And in so doing, you also start to understand more about what is kindness for you. Because going back to like the sugar example, a lot of families, is just becoming commonplace that if somebody's feeling sad, just get them an ice cream cup. I don't know why I'm picking on ice cream today, but I'm picking on ice cream today. Right? Just get them an ice cream cone, right? And here you go. There, you'll feel better, right? And so that becomes you really set into your brain and your idea. And of course, there's a big chemical impact of what sugar does to us to make us feel better. And so that becomes our idea of kindness. And so as we grow up, and of course that can cause other problems from diabetes to obesity, we don't really understand what kindness is for ourselves. Some people just think it's like, bubble baths and spa days, and that can be nice, it can be enjoyable. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it depends on what's going on for us. If an issue is emerging around, let's say, depression, and depression is rooted in, we'll say, trauma today, going to a spa day and a bubble bath will feel nice, but it's not going to get rid of the deeper issue. And so the true kindness in that example is going to draw you towards the issue, to find supports and people that can help you go into it. And you may feel awful for a while as you uncover what's depressed, what's pulling you down into this issue. It'll help you to understand what the issue even is. So in that way, you start to discover what real kindness is for yourself and how to heal. Healing is an incredible kindness. Right? Because what is it doing? It's freeing you. It's freeing you from depression. It's freeing you from pain. So in a very important way, true kindness is about freedom. The freedom to simply be as you are. The freedom to allow others to be as they are. But it's not a blind freedom. So when I say allowing other people to be as they are, it's not blind to issues where somebody's harming another. Actually, it becomes intensely clear if someone else is being harmed that we may need to take action. And when we're clear on ourselves, we're not reactive to it. So we don't necessarily get angry in the same way. Because so much of what people do is completely unconscious. It's completely driven by their pain, by their ego ideas. And so they're not actually making a conscious choice by any means. They're just acting out. They had a bad day at work, so the father comes home and beats his wife, and the wife then beats the child, right? These are unconscious cycles of pain and suffering that the pain just keeps getting passed on. But if you saw that or you knew about it, you may call child services. You may call, the police to report domestic violence. All right, so in that situation, it's a kindness, but are the people who are being offered this going to find this kind? No. And so I just really want to emphasize just how these different situations, how different kindness can look. And it's not really something that I feel like you can prepare a whole lot for, other than doing your own inner work. Because in doing your inner work, you can be present to whatever is going on in front of you and address it in whatever way it may need to be addressed. And some issues aren't yours to address. There are some pains that go on in this world that we cannot fix, we cannot stop. And that's a hard truth for a lot of people to come to terms with. Because we don't want, most of us that are kind souls, and aren't utterly broken, we don't want others to suffer. We don't want others to have their arms blown off, to be stabbed, to be raped, to be stolen from, to be yelled at. That's not how we are. We really are compassionate beings if you strip away all the pain. because people are in so much pain, it's tough to see that these days. And part of that is also the media and what it chooses to focus on. That it tends to show us the most grim, nasty things. It never shows us the child helping the old lady across the street. If 99 children help 99 old ladies across the street, we're not going to see that on the news. We will see the one child who pushed the old lady into the street in front of a car. And that, becomes this image that's presented in front of us. So there's a real interesting way where a lot of our media, a lot of our attention is not focused on kindness at all. So I think that's what makes this topic, particularly important. We need to talk about what true kindness is. We need to set these spaces where we come together and think through some of these issues. We need to consider situations such as what I mentioned with the wise man who's beating the man who's asleep to help him release the snake. Because a lot of society, because we're so used to seeing pain in certain ways, we just assume this guy's nuts. He's not helping when he is. And I think it can be a beautiful practice too, where you consider once or twice a day, what is kindness for myself? To just really sit with it. Don't necessarily run to a question or run to an answer, But just to sit with that. What is kindness really for me? And then later in the day, think about one person where you can offer kindness. And what does that even look like? And see what you're most drawn towards doing or drawn towards saying. It can surprise you. Sometimes it'll be something that somebody doesn't want to hear, but as I said, a lot of times it really is something that someone would appreciate hearing. And to be fair, a lot of people aren't used to kindness. We are in a kindness deficit. So it's like sometimes you can offer a compliment to somebody and they just try to brush it off. They can't handle it. Maybe that's one of your issues, and it could be a way to start to work with yourself is to start to open yourself to compliments when they're sent your way. To allow yourself to receive kindness when somebody is saying you did a good job. Saying that you look nice in that dress. Or whatever it may happen to be. Whatever the offering of kindness happens to be. And I think it's just really important to make this a practice these days when so much attention is drawn towards what's mean. What's the latest put down? What's the latest insult somebody can offer towards a politician, towards a business, towards whoever? Right? A lot of friends sit around and make fun of each other, and it's like, is that friendship? No. Right? But we're getting so used to being mean. People think being sarcastic is a good trait to have, but really it's a kind of meanness, kind of cynicism towards yourself and towards others, towards life. So we really can't emphasize how important investigating kindness in yourself and life is. So just to reinforce that if you aren't sure what kindness is, start to do your inner work. Start to face your own issues, to work through those things that cloud you. The clearer you are in any given moment, it's not that hard to understand what kindness is. It can surprise you. There are a lot of things that I do and say that surprise me. But after a while, you learn to trust it. And so I think there's an element of trust for anything that's new. If you're used to offering kindness and really understand what I'm talking about today, then this isn't so difficult to trust. But every now and then, life is going to say something, or the divine within you is going to say something, say, you need to do that, or stand up to this. And it may surprise you that a part of you gets triggered and says, whoa, I don't know if I can say that. And all I can say is to trust. Trust what this inner knowing is showing you and is pointing you towards. I think most of you will find that you really do just offer very kind things that you would think would be kind already. But it does kind of work up to other things, where in telling the truth, you may be telling people things they don't want to hear, but they may be necessary things. And that's a deeper kind of kindness, like when you tell somebody's a drug addict or an alcoholic that they need to get help, right? That's real kindness. Socially, it's more understood as a kind of kindness. And there are deeper things too, where we start to tell somebody, it's like, you have a real problem with searching for validation in others. That one is not as commonly accepted in society. But I think you kind of work your way up to those moments. I think life tends to be kind to us in that way, that we don't immediately have to start having discussions with others about seeking validation from us, because that happens, right? People may come to you in your life and they're wanting your validation, or vice versa, if you're working on your own issue. Learning to accept ourselves exactly as we are is a great kindness. Letting go of our fears and our pains so that we can be more free is true kindness. The two of those, being as you are and letting go of pain, which typically doesn't let you be as you are, but together, they really offer a level of freedom that frees you from suffering. And in so doing, you can help others find freedom from suffering as well. And that is definitely a true kindness. And that's the focus of many religions, is this release from suffering. And it's a good thing to distinguish between pain and suffering. So to me, pain is a communication tool of the body, and it's part of life, that there are different passing pains and passing discomforts that are just part of being a human being. Suffering is what we do with the pain, is how we respond. That's the thing that we can take care of. That's the thing we can be free of. You can stub your toe, but you don't have to get angry at yourself. So you see, the stubbing your toe is the pain. The getting angry at yourself is the suffering that you're now inflicting on yourself. And as the Buddhists say, that's the second arrow. And so you may get shot with one arrow in life, right? The stubbing of the toe, that's the initial pain. But the second arrow is when you fire at yourself. So as we stop shooting more arrows into ourselves, right, blaming ourselves for being this way or that way, or not being good enough, or not this, it's usually a lot of nots, or not having that, you're going to find so much more freedom. One of my students liked how I was talking this week around, think of those thoughts, those angry thoughts. Even if you're angry at somebody else, you're still actually just abusing yourself. But think of it as abuse. That anger and that fear, any way that you're feeding into it, is a kind of self-abuse. Now, as we go, there are times where different emotions kind of boil up out of us, and that's fine. That's not self-abuse. I make a distinction between what we're actively thinking and believing in, right? And so that's the kind of self-abuse I'm talking about, versus other kind of unpaid bills, other issues that we haven't dealt with that start to come up. And that's very normal and natural, actually, for that sort of stuff to come up. And many of you know that I talk quite a bit around breathing into it, letting it arise, letting it pass, and it does pass. Those are old stub toes that you never really addressed. Those are old emotions that you thought about too much, that just got stuck. And so now they're coming out, and that's to be expected. So those are two big forms of pain that we deal with. The additional inflicted response of ourselves to something uncomfortable. Or even if we're not uncomfortable, sometimes when we're too comfortable, we start to relax, and a part of us doesn't believe that it's okay to be relaxing. We have a big issue with thinking we need to be busy all the time. And if we're not busy enough, we blame ourselves to be lazy and not good enough. And all those sorts of false beliefs come up to make us uncomfortable if we're just sitting on the couch. Some of you may have had this experience. It's amazing how many ways that we are mean to ourselves, how we're abusing ourselves. So one of the most initial steps in this whole discovery of true kindness is to stop abusing ourselves. It can be a problem in the spiritual path where people are just kind of self-abusing to think that's going to help them get better. It's like, oh, I shouldn't be having these thoughts anymore, right? So then you start to abuse yourself for abusing yourself, and it gets kind of ridiculous. So I have a question from John, and you're all welcome to ask questions if anything's coming up for you. Where do you draw a line between making a strong statement about someone's behavior, such as their need for validation, versus not interfering or putting the avoided life lessons right in their face? Well, John, that's why you have to really be in the present moment. Like when you are really in the present moment, really focused on what's arising for yourself, see what comes up. Right? Because that's not like an immediate danger, right? Nobody's physically in any sort of huge danger. It can go either way. And so I can't really generalize where that line would be. And in every situation, it's going to be different for anybody else who's watching today. Some of them are going to end up intuitively moving towards that you just don't interfere. You let them have their life lessons. They're continuing to need validation from others and are trying to draw it out of others. Like a lot of people, some parents will do it with their kids. They're trying to get their kids to validate them. And then for others, you may be more persistent in reminding the person, like, you're trying to get your validation from me, or trying to get your validation from this other person or the spouse or whatnot. So it's just highly variable. It's a great question. And all I can say is to continue in your own inner work. And then in those moments when you're with that person, if it rises up for you to say, then you say it. And part of being strong in your own inner work will help you to be with responses that come from people, because a lot of people aren't going to want to hear anything like that. And you also have to kind of separate yourself from an outcome. And that's a big thing too. That for the most part, we're not going to be so fortunate as to beat the snake out of the sleeping man. That's just not going to be what happens. We have to choose our path, and so do other people, that they have to choose their path. It's very rare that something is so persistent to get the pain out of us, and that's why awakening is such a great gift. And so in making that strong statement, if that's what you're called to do in that moment, then you just have to allow the person to respond, good, bad, or indifferent. For something like needing validation, that's a huge issue. So just getting someone to wrap their head around the fact that they have that issue, especially if this person has no interest in inner work, that could be years. So you can't wait around for that change to come. And you have to be careful that you're not looking for a change to come, that what you're saying is just something that arises from the truth in you. And I think that's a challenge that will further you on in your own work, is that part of you that does want to change. It's looking for a different outcome from the person, which can be our own form of hidden need for validation. But when you're really clear in yourself, and even if you're not super clear, don't create a bar for like how clear you have to be. You'll feel it if you've said something that you needed to. And that has to be enough. That's enough for you. It's like you said what you said. Let me know if that's helpful, John. And if anyone else has questions, feel free to type in the chat. I just think I really want to re-emphasize the need to learn what kindness is for ourselves. It's just such an important thing. We know how to distract ourselves, right? So getting into video games or movies or music, right? Sometimes we think that's kindness, but a lot of times it's more of a distraction from the things that we feel. Being able to fully relax is a kind of kindness that people don't understand. Because usually we kind of relax to a certain point. It's like, this is kind of like we oscillate between this level of energy, but we don't realize we're already like this far above the floor, like a full relaxation. So the bottom hand I want you to think of as the full relaxation. We don't usually go there. We tend to be hovering, and so we kind of stay in a certain zone of agitation. So as we progress on the spiritual path, we really, really start to find out what's holding us up here. And it tends to be a lot of pain and discomfort that we haven't addressed. And so when you start to drop through something, you start to really, really feel it. And as you move down through that, and then when something really shifts, you kind of drop like this. And you just feel so much better. And you have this release, you have this opening, this relaxation, really, all sorts of beautiful things happen. But when you move through it, you think something bad's going on. So I really want you to think about that, because this is another reason why like silent retreats and meditation retreats, or just having 24 hours to yourself where you do nothing, can be really, really useful to work through some of that hidden agitation that you're operating at. And this is a powerful thing, because once you drop down to that next level, like when you start to go back up in agitation, you're more clear that you're going back up into greater levels of agitation. And it starts to feel worse. Even though it's the same level of agitation as before, once you know that you can relax into a deeper state, it's not comfortable to get that excitable or scared or angry or whatever. And there's a tendency to want to go back to a deeper level of rest. And so that also opens you up, opens you to greater clarity of what's going on inside you. And what a kindness it is to move through the fear that you had to go through. And it's more clear what is distracting, what is additionally agitating that's not actually that kind to you after a while. It's like I was talking to one of my students about music, and there's a lot of music I don't listen to anymore because it's too agitating. It's not comfortable to me anymore. And why isn't it comfortable? It's because I operate at a lower level of relaxation, of clarity, of openness. And that music I used to listen to before was a lot more agitated, a lot angrier, and would kind of help me maintain and match a level of anger and discontent. So in that regards, it doesn't even distract, but it just reinforces. And that's really mean. It keeps you really uncomfortable and upset. And yet when we're so used to being uncomfortable and upset, we just think it's normal. So there's another question from Uma. Hi, Jim. How to insulate ourselves from deeply unconscious people around us in our day-to-day activity? Sometimes our old patterns come up as a trigger. Well, it's quite the opposite, actually. It's like we don't insulate ourselves from others, because that's just trying to cut ourselves off from ourselves. The thing that you don't like is your trigger. And the trigger, of course, is not as interesting as what is the bomb that it's attached to. So somebody could say, I don't like your shirt, Jim, right? And if it's attached to my bomb of lack of self-worth or the need for validation, right, then I blow up. I get angry, I get scared, I get upset in some sort of way. So when you're around other people, regardless of how conscious or unconscious they are, and you get triggered, that's a good time to take a few deep breaths and relax. See what's happening in your body. Is your chest clenching? Are you getting nauseous in your stomach? Like, the body is very, very, very honest about where something's going on and what you're doing to yourself. And so by breathing into the areas that are trying to clench down, you can start to get a sense of the fear or the sadness or the anger that's been triggered and address that. That's what you want to address. So in that way, anybody who's deeply unconscious actually can be very helpful in pointing you towards where your issues are. And when you work through an issue, then the same trigger next time, if somebody says, I don't like your shirt, Jim, doesn't do anything. And so that's a very powerful thing. And that's really where I would point you towards. So once again, it's pointing you towards your own inner work so that you can rest in the wisdom and kindness within yourself, Uma. And the more you do that, nobody can take you away from that space without your permission. Let me know if that was helpful. From John. Okay, thank you. I just hesitate sometimes or keep quiet when maybe I should speak up. Sometimes I'm unsure if my discomfort is of having to speak up or if I should really keep quiet. Yeah, I can't tell you that for you, but if your tendency is to not speak up, you probably need to. The more we relax into ourselves, we can do anything. We can speak or not speak. It usually seems to be that Spirit will take us towards the things that we're weak in, and so that's what we work on. But once you know how to speak up in difficult situations, you can speak or not speak as you feel guided. And so I just can't emphasize that we're really paying attention to what's arising inside us. And of course, part of that work is working through enough ego stuff that we know what our intuitive nature is. And as you know what your intuitive nature is, then you have to trust it, as I said earlier. Because if you don't trust it and take action upon it, then it's not going to help you very much, is it? You're welcome, Uma. Thank you for the question. What other questions do people have in the last 15 minutes together? And for anyone who's just joining, my name is Jim Tolles. I'm a spiritual teacher. And if you want to support me and are enjoying this, you can go to my blog and donate through the PayPal button. My blog is spiritualawakeningprocess.com. And thanks to all of you who already donate. It's really greatly appreciated. It is a great kindness for me, because if I wasn't supported by you, if you didn't send your kindness monetarily to me, then I wouldn't be doing this. Or at least I would be doing it far less and have to do something else. And I think that's something that I also try to teach through, I do a suggested donation methodology for my sessions. And while I say it's $150 for a session, I accept everything. So today I got $18 and that's fine. But what I'm trying to teach with that is another form of kindness, that people are kind to themselves in their financial situation and offer kindness to me, rather than moving from that space of being have to pay a certain rate, right? The obligatory payment methodology that we all live in. And it's not a lot of fun, right? When people say that, oh, you have to pay this much for your cell phone or for rent or your mortgage or your food, right? It's like everything is like being told to you, demanded of you. So it's just another way that I try to work kindness into my work and have it be everywhere. And you might also consider, John, that by not speaking up, that's not really being kind to you. So some people, the way we express our meanness is self-inflicted. It's more masochistic. Where other people are more outwardly mean and sadistic. And really the point in any sort of actions around kindness is not to hurt anybody else. Right? I think that's, on the intention level, that's a fundamental difference, is that when you are operating from a space of true kindness, you have no intent to hurt somebody. That should be obvious, but I just felt like adding it in there to be clear. So the intent, once again, to the Rumi poem that I've been quoting, which is also on my blog if you're not familiar, where the man had seen a snake that's crawled into the sleeping man, and the wise man's trying to get it out of him and is beating him. There's no intent to harm there, right? He's generally trying to help and trying to help this man to release this deep pain that's stuck. No, certainly, we can have good intentions that go awry, which is why we do our inner work. And that's why, in getting clear about ourselves, we can see a situation for what it is and address it for what it is. And that's just really, really, really important. Because going back to the the comments about humanitarian aid in the form of peanut butter to a people that doesn't eat peanut butter, or maybe even worse, maybe they're allergic to it, right? That's not coming from a place of clarity. They're not clear about the situation, not clear about the people and their needs. You're welcome, John. And in any situations where we do want to help, it is important to get clear. In the external situation, to research and to talk to people and to really get a good feeling for what is needed, rather than forcing people to accept our solution as the right solution, and then wondering why it doesn't work or only kind of works. What other thoughts and questions do people have? I feel like I'm kind of winding down. I feel like I've kind of gotten to the core of some of these things. All right, be in the moment. Do your own inner work to be clear. Be engaged with life, if it's an external situation, so that you understand the situation in whatever way that you care to help or offer kindness. Trust what comes up, even if it feels really weird. Sometimes the weirdest things that come out of me end up being the most important. I got into a discussion about other dimensions with one of my students. It's not something I talk a lot about, and it's not something I'm going to talk a lot about tonight, because most people, they're kind of looking for an escape on the spiritual path. Or at least some people are, I should say. But in that instance, that intuitively, that was kind of the truth of what we needed to discuss for that session. It was perfect, and all sorts of stuff came up, and the student had been having experiences around those things. So in that way, something that felt very strange and surprising to me as I started talking about it turned out to be the perfect thing, the perfect kindness for that particular session. And that's not something I would have thought my way towards. So it's one of the interesting ways where we put the mind in the backseat. We let the mind come along, but we let intuition drive. Because there's just so many things about life that we can't know, and I really want to emphasize that, I think, in our last couple of minutes together, while anybody's thinking of any last questions they may have, is how much we can't know about life. And that's another reason why we return to this intuitive knowing, this deeper place of clarity. Because this life is so vast and so many things have so many ramifications, right? I kind of wonder about like what happened in California, where there was this anti-LGBTQ initiative, right? Said, marriage had to be between a man and a woman. And that's kind of a bad thing. It was not a kind thing. Yet I think it kind of pushed the conversation towards the Supreme Court, and eventually they decided, no, everybody in the whole country is allowed to marry who they want, regardless of your preference. And so on a greater level, a greater kindness was achieved that came from initial meanness. So this is why it's really difficult. And this is my assessment of the situation. I don't know if it's a correct one, but I'm just kind of giving you an example of how strange and weird life is and how it works itself out at times. This is why we go to our intuition, why we do the best that we can get clear, because we just can't see everything. We can't know how these things are going to work out. We just can't. And so as rational as we'd like to think we are, there's so many things that are just not going to correspond to any amount of human thought. It's just not the way it works. And intuition, as always, I like to emphasize it's clear. It doesn't actually force you to do anything. There's no threat to it. Sometimes we may add other emotions on top of it because we don't like what we're being told. But it's there. And it tends to be consistent. And so if you feel like you need to speak up about somebody and their need for validation, that intuition will tend to be consistent. It tends to stay there. It doesn't come and go. It doesn't hem and haw. The ego mind is going to hem and haw. Like, yes, maybe, no, right? But the deeper knowing inside tends to stay the same. So I think these are kind of my thoughts for tonight about what true kindness is. I don't think it actually has to be very difficult. And I do encourage you to kind of consider this in your actions with yourself and with others about what is truly kind. And maybe tune out a little bit more of the ongoing meanness that seems to be going on multiple levels of society these days. Because I think we all need a few more examples of people truly acting kind to one another, so more and more people can find their way towards freedom. So I don't see any other questions, so I think that's all I have to share tonight. My next free online talk is going to be in 2 weeks. It'll be about the freedom of a meaningless life. We'll talk about all the problems meaning gives us and how not needing to have meaning can be a great freedom, a great joy. It too will be free. It'll be at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. That way some of my friends over in Europe and the United Kingdom can join and don't have to get up in the middle of the night. And once again, I'm Jim Tolles. You can find my regular posts at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. And I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks, everyone.